Hey, this is LOA Today, the Law of Attraction show. Welcome to LOA Today. Walt Thiessen and Joel Elston here. It is Thursday, March the 9th, 2017. We continue our ongoing exploration of Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. This week we are on Chapter 13, The Brain, a broadcasting and receiving station for thought. That, Joel, is a very provocative subtitle. I mean, the brain, that's not so provocative. I mean, we all have a pretty good idea that the brain is important, and it became very important in scientific circles in the 20th century. But a broadcasting and receiving station for thought, that's controversial.
It was extremely controversial when it was written. In fact, it was by many viewed as ridiculous when it was written. And we say every week, so the ones that are following this journey, we'll get it out of the way early. This Napoleon Hill was way ahead of his time. This chapter in particular, I'm not going to get too overly dramatic with my analogy, but when you look at what he was doing, especially when we get to the brain stuff, I have a great deal of question of how he really got it so accurately way back then with the limited knowledge that was available.
Well, I'll tell you what, he starts off with what we would not necessarily recognize as controversy without knowing some history. So let me read the paragraph, and I'll tell you what the controversy is. It says, more than 20 years ago, of course this was written toward the middle of the Great Depression, or published during the middle of the Great Depression. More than 20 years ago, the author, working in conjunction with the late Dr. Alexander Graham Bell and Dr. Elmer R. Gates, observed that every human brain is both a broadcasting and receiving station for the vibration of thought. Now, I actually looked up who Dr. Elmer R. Gates are. Do you know who he is, Joel?
I do not.
Interesting person. He was kind of one of the cool things about medicine and science during the 19th and 20th centuries was that it was relatively free form. I mean, people could they could get their degree and then they would go wild with their explorations because they weren't dealing with government grants and government restrictions and the FDA and all that kind of stuff. So, they went kind of far afield, and he went kind of far afield himself. I can't tell you everything he did. He had a very strong interest in psychology. But what I can tell you is that he had this theory that Hill turns into the theory of the human brain sending out vibrations. That's not the way Gates thought of it. Gates thought of it in a much more local situation of the person basically enhancing their own mental abilities. And he was critical of anyone who said otherwise. Now, the really interesting part is that the resource I checked, of course we always check this first, right, is Wikipedia, because it's free, it's online, it's right there. And Wikipedia did something very interesting with it. They cited what Gates had to say. They cited the fact that Napoleon Hill mentions him in the book, but they do not accuse Napoleon Hill of distorting Gates' views. Now, how is that for interesting?
Wow, that's a lot of information for me to digest at this point. I like that. I like it. I don't have any. I've never heard of him other than reading this chapter. In fact, I've never even thought about researching him. I'm glad you did.
Well, I like to find out obscure and basically often useless things because most of the stuff I check are obscure and useless. But every once in a while I get a nugget of useful information, and this was a useful one. I mean, there was a controversy about this guy because he felt that his information that he was putting out there was being misused. But no one wanted to say that about Napoleon Hill's book. And I conjecture it's because Hill's book was so successful. It was very, very famous. And so, I mean, if you're Gates, what are you going to do? Shoot down the book that basically is giving you any degree of notoriety at all?
Exactly, and that's one of the things when we get into it sort of in the depth of this chapter, or where my level of study, and I have really been focused, as you know, in the last since you and I have been doing this show, I think you've caught on that I go on sort of different tangents for a while in different directions.
You think?
Yes, and the brain has been my fascination, and the term vibrate. You and I have had this discussion for a long time.
Oh,
yes,
yeah.
about about vibration, and in the beginning, you really weren't too sold on that word. You didn't really particularly like.
Well, I
that
didn't
concept.
understand what was meant by it. What is the vibration? Is it like, do I see my brain on a MRI and it's literally vibrating back and forth? I mean, what is that? What is a vibration? I didn't understand what was meant by that.
Right, absolutely, and I've shared with you that multiple times a week, and sometimes for long periods of time, I can get to a point where I literally feel the vibration. I feel the connection in my brain, the positive thoughts, the power that the brain does have. And I've felt the exchange with people. I think every week when we share and we get into this very enthusiastic discussion and we feel better, there's a vibration that goes with that. And I think people that turn into the show tune in, they also tune into the vibration of what we're doing. That's why you and I made a conscious effort probably halfway through this as we're sort of evolving our programming, especially when we're on various topics, not on a set topic, to make sure we end the show on a positive vibration, to make sure that we escalate. If we're discussing anything negative, we want to make sure it's not toward the end of the show. We don't want to leave our audience and ourselves with a feeling of, wow, that's sort of defeating the point. And as Napoleon Hill's talking about the brain and the ideas that we're seeing exposed in science right now, the term epigenetics and quantum thinking. Quantum thinking to me is just simply the science of what he was talking about all those years ago. How the brain actually puts out and receives. We obviously receive with our eyes. We receive images. The brain processes those images. We hear things. The brain processes what we hear. It interprets it different for many people. That's one of the fun parlor games you used to hear about is people either witnessing or talking about a subject, and they're repeating back what they heard or what they witnessed, and you'll be amazed. One of the things that I always do when I watch work with younger kids, I have this big carnival poster in my office that's hidden under. They don't let the adults see it because it's just so distracting. But it is this bizarre picture with elephants and just all this stuff, and it's in a cartoon setting. And I have the kid I said, stare at this for 5 minutes or 3 minutes, whatever we can get him to stare at it for. and afterwards, I ask, what do you see in this poster? Mm-hmm. What did you see? Tell me. And I am amazed at. I don't know if any two kid has ever seen the exact same thing. Mm. In fact, I'm always shocked because I see different than what they're seeing as I'm looking, because, again, they're seeing the information, but what their brain is focusing on, and the reason I do that, because it is to prove a point, as I'm proving now with our audience with that analogy, that yes, we see something, and that's where right and wrong, we think right and wrong as being black and white, or we think this or we think that, or I'm cursed or I'm not cursed. Your brain is picking up on that, and it's saying, yes, you are cursed, or no, you're not. Your brain is not in the job of actually deciphering or trying to hear don't do something or do. It just picks up what it is, and that vibration, how we're feeling, it's amazing. It's how it really sort of relates to the law of attraction and how we use it.
Well, one thing I finally came to terms with was the idea of vibration, and the way I did it was by thinking in terms of it as positive and negative, because I realized all the teachings were about vibration in that context. Right. And once I thought about it that way, then I could kind of make some sense out of it, because with sound, for instance, a high pitch versus a low pitch, when you think about it, there really is no such thing as high or low. And I'll tell you a little quick story to help illustrate this. When I was quite a bit younger, I was approached by a mom in the neighborhood where I was living who had heard that I played in rock bands, which I did. And she said to me, I have a son who's been trying to take guitar lessons for a number of years and not succeeding. And I said, oh, why? What's been happening? And she says, well, it doesn't matter who teaches him. He just can't seem to get it at all. And I was wondering if maybe you might be willing to give him some guitar lessons. And it really was not on my radar at all. I had no intention of being a guitar teacher. But I figured, okay, I'll give it a shot. Maybe, this is a way of finding something that I like to do. As it turned out, it wasn't, but that's okay. That's a secondary story. The primary story is I met with this kid. His name was Richie. And the first time I sat down with Rich, I said to him, okay, well, can you try to play me something? And he was a little reluctant, but he did. And as he started to play, it was painful to watch him do it. It was painful to hear it. Without getting too much into the technique of guitar playing, when you're strumming with a pick, you want to keep your wrist fluid and loose. His wrist was rigid, absolutely rigid. It was like he was attacking the strings with a hammer. That's the way his fist looked. And he also did not seem to have any idea of how scales worked. Scales are kind of critical. I mean, even if you're not a musician, you recognize do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. You recognize that as a scale. He didn't seem to understand any of that. And I thought that was pretty weird because he'd been taking lessons for about 4 or 5 years. I mean, normally you learn, the notes and all that pretty early on, and he didn't seem to have any of it. Well, long story short, come to find out, he had no idea what pitch was.
Oh, wow.
The idea was foreign to him. And what I had to do was take him over to the piano that we had, sit him down, and start hitting keys. I started hitting C's, which are an octave apart. And I went to middle C. I said, okay, you hear that note? Yeah. And I hit the C 1 octave up from that. And I said, is that higher or lower? And he said, I don't know. I said, really? So this doesn't sound higher or lower than that one? No. All right. Well, okay. That one kind of stymied me for a minute. And I worked with it and thought about it, and I finally realized the problem was with the words high and low. So I said to him, does it sound different? And he said, yeah. I said, okay. So I explained to him how sound works, and that with what we call higher notes, there's a higher level of vibration. Lower notes have a lower level of vibration. That's why we call them high or low. He said, nobody ever told me that before. Now he finally had a context to understand high note versus low note. And I won't go into the whole story after that. Bottom line is I taught him to play guitar in about 3 weeks, and my teaching was done.
Well, but what you were able to do is you figure out a way that his brain or his way of learning or what was missing in the process. How do you describe to a blind person who's never seen anything the color red? How do you describe that?
Oh, absolutely. That's the problem. That's precisely the problem. But once I thought about it in those terms, I applied the same principle, if you will, to how to understand the brain vibrating. And I realized, okay, well, positive emotions feel better. So for the sake of discussion, let's say that's higher vibration. And negative emotions feel worse, so for the sake of discussion, let's call those lower vibration. Now at least I had some way to make sense out of it, and come to find out, yeah, that's what everybody's talking about. The positive stuff is higher vibration, the negative stuff is lower vibration. So now all of a sudden I had a context that I could at least make some sense out of it.
Well, and I'm glad because I know when I first heard this, and I believe it was the Abraham Hicks stuff I was listening to, and they're really into the vibrating statement, and I too was clueless. I was like, okay, I'm sorry, I'm done already. I
think I'll move on to my next activity for the day.
Exactly, but the concept was so interesting that I needed to pursue it, and once I understood how the spiraling up, when I can spiral up or when I spiral down, the vibration of the excitement of my day, or when I feel really good, that's a spiral upward, and I try to live in that. I try to, I love living in that. However, when I'm on the spiral down, I've learned to seek that vibration of that higher feeling. It's sort of like tuning into. It's like one of the descriptions somebody uses is tuning into a radio, finding the frequency. Now, I have yet to master what I hope to one day be able to master of the continual vibration, where I'm constantly tuned in, where I can lock in the radio on the signal and it never loses it. I think that's where we're all shooting. That's what we're all shooting for.
Well, Abraham Hicks is shooting for that for us. The phrase that they use is tapped in, tuned in, turned on.
Yes. And so as we're is not to scare the audience with some, okay, what is Joel and Walt talking about this week? But the brain itself, it is a relatively short chapter in the book compared to some of the others. But the where we're at now with the brain, and now where we understand, and a lot of Einstein's theories have been proven, which support a lot of the quantum thinking theories, where we are really creating things in our environment that we didn't understand that we were creating before.
That's a gigantic statement.
It is.
That's a statement that is mind-blowing, because it doesn't seem to fit anything that makes any sense outside of the context of this crazy conversation about how the brain works and how the law of attraction works.
Right, and that piece. One thing that I have, in my first sort of understanding of this, I was baffled when I've been doing counseling now for 20 years, and when I first got into it, I did not really understand the difference between what was happening when I would sit down with one person and I would give them my all in a session and after the session go, oh my gosh, that was really good, I did a great job there. And then somebody else would come along and I'm going, wow, I just don't, they didn't seem to get it. I don't understand what I did wrong. I did basically the same thing, but I felt entirely different about it. And then as I progressed, I realized, that they're not in tune with what I'm thinking, or they're not understanding, or we're not really relating. And then it evolved for me that I will have certain clients. There's very few of these, by the way. So if one of my clients is listening, I hope it's not, you think it's you. It's not hardly anymore, but I've had clients where I've sat in my office and I have a clock that's behind me, but I have an angle I can look at it in a mirror that nobody really knows I'm looking at the clock. It's pretty clever. That way people don't think you're clock watching.
Right.
And I will be in session with some people, Walt, and it seems like that hour just disappeared. It was like, how did that go by so fast? That was amazing.
Oh, that's an experience that everybody experiences. You don't have to be a therapist to get that one. There's sometimes time just seems to race, and other times it just seems to drag.
And then, you filled in the blank for me on that next one. Then I have the one client in there that I'm looking and said, okay, that has to be 30 minutes. My goodness, and 4 minutes have ticked by. Then I'm having to fight the yawning instinct inside of me. And those that know me, and as you know me, I have high energy. I'm not lazy. I'm not a yawner. But when that energy is draining my energy, it is like a power drain to me. But when I'm with somebody who's vibrating on this level, and they don't even have to understand they're doing it, my energy is increased. It's like when two of us get together, we're quadrupling. It's more than it's a power of 10 kind of feeling where your energy is combining and pushing you both forward. But if one side's a drain, it is like pulling teeth. It is just, oh, wow, this takes forever.
And I would think actually you would run into that fairly often, because as a therapist, you're going to deal with a number of people who are depressed or dealing with very negative situations. So I would imagine a lot of them at least sometimes feel that.
Well, and what I'm finding pretty much for the most part is even my depressed patients that there's something in them that once you get that spark going, and as you know, people that can, I'm not a big fan of being a victim of things.
Right.
And while certainly we have things happen to us and we have to sort of respond to them, I'm not a big fan of playing the role of victim longer than absolutely necessary. And for me, that's about 4 or 5 minutes at most being necessary.
Right.
And so,
it's the difference between what my wife calls being a victim and being a volunteer.
Volunteer, exactly. The energy of someone who is conditioned to be a victim is a very draining energy for me. I'm speaking for me. I don't know that's for everyone, but people that refuse. One of my favorite clients was he came to me shortly, and we're doing a history, and I said, tell me significant things that have happened in your life. And he's like, well, he had lost a couple of family members, including a child, and some very significant things that happened. And then probably about halfway through, he said, oh, I forgot to tell you, I woke up in the middle of the night, my house was on fire, but I got me and the dogs out and everything's fine, but the house burned to the ground.
Okay.
I'm like, oh, I said, okay, well, that's sort of something I thought would have been probably a little higher on the list. And he laughed. And he said, well, he said, it's just stuff, Joel. And he said, and I got an insurance settlement. Everything was fine. No big deal. So it didn't even really register on my radar. Well, ironically, several years later, I had another client, a young man who was very, very adept at playing the role of victim. He was telling me, I said, what was your big trauma? Or tell me about some traumas or what has happened to you. And he said, oh, my condo burned to the ground and I lost everything. It was horrible. I have nightmares about it. I go, oh my God, were you there? And he goes, no, I was on vacation. And I was like, oh, I said, well, did you lose any pets or anything? Oh, no. I said, well, what did you have insurance? He said, yeah, well, actually, I probably made quite a bit of money on it since they paid me just the whole thing.
Wow.
And I said, so was that really a problem? But he viewed that as a huge trauma. And the other guy had woken up with his house on fire, grabbed the dog, got out, lost everything. And, hey, yeah, whatever, And again, a lot of it is how we choose to. Your brain has the ability, part of this vibrational point. Your brain, traumas are real. I'm not trying to say traumas aren't real, but our brain has to accept they were traumas for them to be traumas. One person's trauma is not necessarily another person's trauma.
Which is a weird thing the first time that you run into that idea, when you realize that what's eating you up alive isn't even touching that other person over there. It's almost like you're disconnected from them.
Completely. And that's such a big thing that, when you understand that, Walt, and you and I have talked about this in various forms or fashion, but the brain relies on us to give it context to what it's seeing and hearing.
Right.
When the emotional attachment to what you're seeing and hearing is there, the brain knows what to do with it, because we are in charge of that, and that's the piece that is so exciting. Mm-hmm. It's also the piece that that's why when we're working with people, or when we I've been told, I've actually had some people that have. I lost my son TJ a few years ago in a horrible automobile accident, and as you know, I choose from almost day one after my horrible couple of days, and it was very bad the first few days, but my decision to make TJ become the joy of my life, his memory to be a daily reminder of all he brought to me. TJ's death changed for me. Now, you and I have talked a lot about that.
Oh, yeah.
And so when I share that concept with some people, there are people that actually angers. It is amazing to me that I will get messages from people that are not nice. They say, are you telling me that I'm grieving wrong?
I'm willing to bet that some of them are saying that you're dishonoring your son.
Exactly. I've heard that. And I've heard people say that, I'm not, it upsets me because I lost my child. And while I'm not telling anyone how to do anything in their life, I'm not telling anyone that you should do it my way. I just have figured out that I handled that in my way of handling it the best possible way for me. I will not be TJ is a blessing in my life. I refer to him as still being here. He is a blessing in my life. I think about him daily. He makes me smile every day. And when I do that, I am reminded of all the great stuff. Of course, I miss my son. Of course I do. I would love for us to get together and have a burger and laugh like we always used to do. But since I can't do that, I rely on the memories of him, and all of that is a great joy to me. So I am able to take that trauma and have joy of my son's life and not let the trauma of his loss dictate my world.
Yes.
And that is such a blessing that I discovered this, and I'm not trying to tell anyone else that's how they have to do it. You have to figure out how to do this for yourself, what works. But on every aspect of our life, I have a very good friend who was in a family business, and which, by the way, if you're in a family business, if you can, get out of it before it destroys you. But that's,
well, there's an interesting piece of advice right there.
Yeah, I'm just throwing that out there. But those seldom end very well, to be honest with you. And but that's another show for another show. But jokingly, I say that. And he basically knew this job wasn't right for him. We had talked about this. And when he finally left / was fired, his initial reaction was horror that, oh, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? And we had a conversation very shortly after it happened, and we turned it into, what an incredible new opportunity. I finally am free of this. And that's what he did. And within a few days, he had multiple offers. He still hasn't chosen which one. They keep coming in.
Wow.
He will be able to choose from a variety of things, making more money than he was doing before. And all that was really, in the beginning, was like my world was coming to an end versus this incredible opportunity is right around the corner. He was able to choose to do that. The brain is in charge of traumas. How you feed it and what you attach to it is how the brain sort of determines it.
So we've actually found the good side of a family business, and that is how you leave it.
How you leave it. And I know with my dad, I was in the family business, and it didn't end well. And fortunately, my dad's still with us, and he's doing very well. And we've healed all of the wounds of that, but that wasn't a great thing for us. And I do know some families make it, and I jokingly say get out. But also be aware, it's hard to have a family business. There's a million reasons why.
Oh, sure.
Because it's just one of those ongoing things that there's a new dynamic attached to that. But as far as what we get to do, what our brain gets to do, is the great joy in all of this is our brain has just such remarkable resiliency. It has the ability to change. It has the ability to see things differently. We can learn new things forever. As long as we're alive and the brain is functioning, new things can be learned. The old concept that the brain is, you can't learn things after a certain age, that's ridiculous. Just incredibly ridiculous. I know multiple people that have learned entirely new things in their 70s, 80s. A lot of my friends in Florida are very fit, older people that I've known for years. They've learned how to be on the internet. They've learned how to do it's amazing what they can do. And their mind's still incredibly fresh. Mm-hmm. So the idea that all of this, the brain is an incredible tool. He talks about all the cells and the neurons, and he gets in great detail. There's so much more since this time, obviously, what they understand.
Right.
But the brain's ability to process, it isn't necessarily the speed that it processes that's so freaky, which it is before computers. Computers are faster than the brain. However, the brain has the ability to understand things differently, to see it differently, to adapt, to change, and whether computers ever get there or not, I don't know, but we're nowhere close at this point. The brain's power and energy, the computer doesn't vibrate the way the brain vibrates. There's a presence to the brain that has yet to be defined all the way in my belief system. There's an energy there that is measurable. They can measure the brain and the waves that the brain puts out. And I think we can pretty much pick up on other people's energy. I cannot read anyone's mind, Walt. I wish I could. Maybe I don't wish I can, but I can pick up on their energy. And one of the things that I was always amazed at is I think animals have an instinctive way to pick up on the energy of human beings as well. I have had a dog growing up that was the nicest dog in the world. But there is this one guy that would come into the house, and he did not like, it was, and we always laughed, said, this is a very seemingly benign, person, and it, just why is the dog so upset? Well, that guy ended up doing quite a bit of bad stuff that got him put away for the rest of his life, and the dog knew that. The dog saw that,
right?
it did not like him around us, and he picked up on that energy. So we are placing an energy out there, and our brain there's this vibration taking place. If you ever have the privilege of that really positive state, whether it's from meditation or really, I feel it a lot after a mastermind meeting. We've talked about that. Mm-hmm. Once you feel that, it becomes a goal to live there. And that's what we see. That's where you go. And as you graduate, in my mind, as you move up the levels of the understanding and practicing how to use the law of attraction on your behalf, I think that's the key, that you learn to live in that. The more and more you can live there, the more amazing. The rest of the stuff almost doesn't matter.
Well, you've touched on a few things there, and I think he ties them together in the chapter. So let me go to what he wrote there. He wrote, and the things I'm referring to that you mentioned are TJ, the ability or inability to read minds, and how the mastermind concept and the mastermind experience leads to exchanges of energy and thought and so forth in ways that are almost unpredictable. But anyway, he writes this: "We are now entering the most marvelous of all ages." And this, of course, was in the 1930s. "An age which will teach us something of the intangible forces of the world about us. Perhaps we shall learn as we pass through this age that the, quote, other self, unquote, is more powerful than the physical self we see when we look into a mirror. Sometimes men speak lightly of the intangibles, the things which they cannot perceive through any of their five senses. And when we hear them, it should remind us that all of us are controlled by forces which are unseen and intangible." He's touching on this whole concept of energies that are not detectable by five senses. And the moment you start looking at that, that's where you mentioned Einstein. That's where the whole idea of quantum thinking comes in. The idea of energies that cannot be touched, seen, smelled, felt, or heard. They're not detectable by five senses. And yet, we are now more and more aware that such there are actually thought forms and so forth that can be measured. I mean, we can now measure a thought. We couldn't do that in the 1930s, but we can do that now. We can actually detect people picking up other thoughts. He even makes reference to it in this book. He talks about a professor at Duke University who was doing experiments with telepathy and clairvoyance, and it was very, very early testing at that point in time. Now it's not like the scientific community has embraced it, because they haven't, but more and more has been discovered through scientific research to show that, there's something there. There's something. The science may not be sure what it is, but there's something there. What you're talking about with TJ and with your other experiences there are all tied into these, what we'll call sixth senses. And the sixth senses are a critical portion of how the law of attraction works, and they're also a critical portion of how this whole chapter of the brain and Think and Grow Rich works. Because you mentioned the mastermind. Toward the end of the chapter, he talks about a mastermind of three getting together to solve a problem, and how the unseen portion of the thought process interacts between the three minds and to places that he doesn't specify what they are, but he's implying the other side, getting information from the other side. That process ends up producing results that are just astonishing. And now we're starting to touch on what you were talking about, the ability of human minds to work together to in a mastermind context to tap into the other side. This is about as woo-woo as you can get. And he got there in the 1930s.
Wow. That's the piece that just astonishes me, the fact that with the knowledge we have now, it's still considered a way out there concept for most people. And the fact that he was able all I can gather is he felt it enough to put it in words. His descriptive, his ability to describe what he was feeling is so incredibly accurate. That's amazing to me. And that's the piece that excites me, that I know we're onto something. Because it's there's a video that if I can think about it, Walt, I'll send it to you. Maybe we can get it on our website, or at least a link to it.
Oh, okay.
It's a TED Talk, and a gentleman, I may have mentioned this before, he takes basically a transmitter, and he figures out the frequency that the brain sends commands down the arm. And what he does is he puts the transmitter on my arm, and then he puts a receiver on another person's arm. And he tells me to move my fingers and tells the other person to clear their mind and think about something else. The other person's fingers also move.
Yeah.
But that's amazing. That is the beginning of this. And everybody say, well, that's a simple electrical impulse. That's different. No, it's not. It is basic, but it's the same concept. And the idea of us attaching that energy to a positive or a attracting what we want by sort of labeling, this is how I'm viewing. We think and grow rich by growing and thinking and believing that we're rich, by living that, by we have an abundance. The abundance is already here. That's where we're tuning into. When you attach this tuning in process to what you truly want, that's what you're bringing here. Now, if you don't believe that you can do that, then you absolutely cannot do that.
Well, the people who take the position that you described that says that, well, that's just an electrical connection going on there, and they use it in a dismissive way. They're basically saying that's really nothing novel there. There's a message for them that I think might help them bridge the gap, and that is science does have some knowledge about how the nervous system works. And among other things, they're able to measure how long it takes for a thought impulse or a result from a thought impulse, whatever you want to call it, to be sent from the brain to somewhere else in the body, say, down to your toe or something like that. And it's an extremely slow process. I mean, it's measured in single-digit miles per hour. It takes quite a bit of time for a thought to generate a signal that passes down through the nervous system to your big toe. Okay, well, if it's that slow, will you please explain to me how it is that high-speed, high-quality athletes are able to do amazingly, ridiculously quick stuff? It should be impossible.
Right.
If everything is dependent upon that electronic signal going through the nervous system, everything that an athlete does, everything that a dancer does, everything that any person does, a magician, if the hand is quicker than the eye, that should be impossible. It should be impossible for the hand to move that quickly. It should be impossible to redirect our attention that easily because the thought process is so slow in terms of how it interacts with the nervous system. So here's a question for the person who thinks that, well, that's just an electrical signal. If that's the way the nervous system works, how do we manage to think quicker?
Yes.
How do we manage to do that?
Yes, and that is the question that sort of defines what we're talking about. The idea that all of this as we develop the brain, as we answer the questions that are out there, you see the law of attraction is coming closer to being proven with today's science versus being disproven.
Oh yes. And science isn't ready to acknowledge that, but there's no doubt.
Right. When I speak to positives, I laugh this every week. I was speaking with a professor from the University of Oregon that is very into the positive psychology movement, and I slipped up again and the law of attraction and got the 10-minute lecture on why the law of attraction is not positive psychology.
Right.
Until he understands that it is, and he got the 10-minute lecture on why it is.
So fair is fair.
It worked out. And, I don't know if I'd necessarily change his mind, but we're saying the same thing. But within all of this, with all that we're talking, the resilience, the power of the brain, it is the centerpiece. It is a receiver. It is a transmitter, and we're receiving and putting out. And what we're putting out is what we're receiving back, and that becomes the key. If your negative inner dialogue is, I am a loser, I am poor, I don't have this, I'm a victim of this, nobody likes me, I'm sorry, but you're absolutely right.
More precisely, you're creating it.
Exactly. I don't have permission to use his name, but I wasn't going to share it. I was going to wait to Facebook it when I can share it. But I want to tell a story that happened today that was just fascinating to me. One of my clients is a 19-year-old recovering cancer patient.
Wow.
And he had a severe form of I forget the name of the cancer, but it's a very rare cancer that affects the pancreas.
Oof.
And it has like a 6% survival rate.
Yeah.
And he survived it.
Wow.
And he's in remission and he's doing well. However, he's still very weak.
Yeah.
His hair's coming back. And his family, the reason that I'm involved, I had nothing to do with the treatment of the cancer or any of that. We had a great team of doctors that handled that. But what I was brought in, the doctor referred to me. He said, look, technically, this young man is well, and he needs to get busy and start living life.
Uh-huh.
But mentally, he was still a cancer patient.
Right.
So we have been working. He was still in a wheelchair. There's no reason for him to be in a wheelchair. So a few weeks ago, we got together. I think this is about our fourth week. So let's say fourth week, a few times a week. And first time we got together, I talked to him. I said, we're going to need to go to the gym and start doing some stuff. And he reminded me he was a cancer. He used the term, I'm a cancer victim. And he said, I cannot work out. My bones are fragile from all the treatment. And I said, okay, well, you can walk, can't you? And he's, well, barely. So we started out walking a little bit. Mm-hmm. And then I got him on one of the weightlifting machines, and we're able to do certain things. And I got him, there's a move called a deadlift. And for those that know weightlifting, it's simply, if they don't know weightlifting, it's simply picking up a bar off the ground. There's a form you do it, but it's literally bending over, picking up a bar, and seeing how much weight you can pick up. It's a competitive lift. And power lifters can get almost 800, 900, 1,000 pounds sometimes. They're really super strong guys. So this young man, we started out, he could not pick up the bar a few weeks ago.
And the bar weighs what?
The bar weighs 45 pounds.
Okay.
And so he which is still a heavy bar, and he couldn't pick it up. But I said, hey, at least you're trying. Well, I've been pushing him a little harder each time. And then each time he says, I want to throw up. Let me sit in my chair. So today I checked with the doctor. I said, is this guy okay? And he goes, he's fine. He needs you to push him harder than you're pushing him. And so I said, okay. I said, we're going to do it today. So I strategically placed he didn't see me, but a trash can near us. And I had him lift it. We got 10 pounds 20 pounds on the bar to make a total of 65 last week. This week I put a 25 on each side, and this was going to, we're stepping it up to 95 pounds this week.
Right.
And he reached out, I can't do it. I said, you're going to do this. And we'd walked a quarter mile, and he's made some good progress, but today was more about a mental breakthrough, and he should have been able to, I know he can lift the weight. And so he bent down and he couldn't do it. And I said, you're going to do this. And I said, no. And he said, I'm going to sit in my chair. And I said, no, you're going to lift this weight. Then you can sit in your chair. And so we got back and forth. He said, I'm going to throw up. And I got the trash can. I said, let's do it, buddy. Let's rock. And he looked at me, and he actually got a little mad at me. And he said, I'm just going to lift this. And when I fall out, you're going to feel bad. And I said, I will feel bad. Let's do it. And he lifted the weight. And he didn't throw up. And he said, oh, my God. His total, everything changed instantly. Well, everything. And he said, I think I can add more weight to this. And he added 10 more pounds on each side. So, wow, now I'm like, wow. And I said, well, now I'm on the other side. Okay, let's don't overdo this. And we ended up going through the gym. He did some more stuff. I pulled our trash can around with us. People were coming up and patting him on the back going, oh, my God. And so he's pushing his own wheelchair around.
Right.
And we get through there. And so he's an entirely different guy. And by the end of the workout, after 1 hour, he's an entirely different guy. And he said, and I said, you're no longer a victim of cancer. Cancer is a victim of you. And he said, that's right. I really appreciate that. So we go to the car, and he's parked in the handicap parking zone. He's still not back in his wheelchair. He took his wheelchair by himself, folded up, put it in the trunk, goes in. He has the temporary handicap sticker that hangs from his mirror. He handed it to me. He goes, don't need this anymore.
Yeah.
His mom called me. His mom called me and goes, "What did you do?" He said he's ready to go back to work. He's blah, blah, blah. All that. He said he's instantly been transformed. I said he instantly quit being a victim today. He's well. He's fine. He's going to thrive. She said, I got to go buy a bunch of food. He's eating like crazy right now. and so all of this is different. That's a very uplifting story that all that took place, Walt, was a simple change of thought.
And I don't want to minimize that, because the tendency is going to be for a skeptic to hear that story and say, well, of course, he could do that all along. It's not like the cancer was actually holding him back. The doctor told us he could actually do this. This is not an amazing thing. And if you say that, you're missing the point, because the point is he thought it was impossible.
Yes. Well, and that's the key here is it was going to be impossible as long as he thought it was impossible.
And that's it right there. He thought it was going to be impossible as long as he thought it was impossible. Now, let's turn the scenario around. Not necessarily him, but just any person, person X. Person X is doing something. I mean, he was doing something that the entire population of the United States, if they knew the story, could say, well, yeah, he can do that.
Yes.
But person X is someone who's trying to do something, and if the entire population were surveyed, they'd say, no, he can't do that.
Yes.
So in other words, a completely different mindset. Now imagine that there's a being who is aware that he actually really can do it. But you can call him God if you want. You can call him just another person. You can imagine that other being, whoever you want them to be. But the point is, that person actually knows, yeah, this person really can do it. Doesn't matter that all those other people around there don't think he can do it. Doesn't matter that he doesn't know, that he doesn't think he can do it. I actually know he really can do it. We just got to convince him to do it.
Right.
Now, here's the interesting point. It's exactly the same scenario. It's the same scenario told from different perspectives.
Yes. And that becomes the answer to so many questions. You know, I've spoken of this before, where, you know, I've known identical twins that have grew up in a horrible setting, a severely abusive alcoholic father. Mother abandoned them. The father just was horrible. One grew up and became an alcoholic. The other grew up and never touched alcohol. And when you ask each of them why, they say it's because my father drank. They had the same answer.
Yeah.
It's just perspective of what it meant to them. And
the perspective led to different choices.
It led to different choices. And it's the same thing with us every day, Walt. The gift of the law of attraction, the exciting piece, the reason I wake up feeling like I wake up every morning is the law of attraction has taught me that I and I alone am in charge of the way I feel. Nobody else can dictate to me. And once I accept that, I'm in charge of what the universe offers to me. I'm in charge of that. If I'm going to be without and focus on the lack of what I have, I will continue to attract a lack. If I look at the abundance, I was talking to you before about incredible opportunities that are coming my way. In fact, I'd like to call a timeout on opportunities for a while until I can level them out, you know?
Yeah, right.
It's like we get a lot of good opportunities here. And it's the idea that this is great stuff, Walt. We're in tune with that. It's the power of it. It's what the brain tying this all together is where it takes place. And that is so exciting to me.
It is exciting. I'm going to tell you another little story here. I don't know if I've ever told you this. I have macular degeneration. Did I ever tell you about that?
No, I never knew that.
Yeah, I have, and the acronym is AMD, which basically means age-related macular degeneration. They call it that because it's always in older people, and I'm not sure why they say that, because I do know there are exceptions where it happens in younger people, but nevertheless, I guess they call it that because most are older people who are the victims of it. And it comes in two forms. They call it one the dry form and one the wet form. I won't go into it. The wet form basically means there's blood involved, but I won't go into it any deeper than that. But the dry form leads to blindness about 10% of the time. The wet form leads to blindness about 90% of the time. Now, I didn't know that I had any of it until I went to an eye doctor, because I wear glasses, and got an examination 7 or 8 years ago. And at that time, I learned for the first time that I had it. Now, normally, if you get to the bad one, the wet one, you get there through the dry one. And I've seen sources that say that's always the way it goes. When I first heard about it, I had the wet one. And on top of that, I was already blind in my left eye. Because macular degeneration, what it does is the thing that you're able to focus on, you can focus on a single point, and that's how you're able to read and so forth. That gets basically obliterated. It's called the macula. And the macula gets obliterated, and now you're effectively blind. You can see peripherally to some degree, but straight ahead you can't see. And I had already noticed serious deterioration in that eye. What I didn't realize it was that it was gone, but I'd already noticed that. And so when I got word of that was pretty devastating. And then the second devastating thing is they believe that if you get it in one eye, you're going to get it in the other eye, and you're going to go blind. And there's nothing they can do to prevent it. They can give you treatments. There are vitamins you can take. There are eye injections and so forth that will slow it, and slow it dramatically. But they can't cure it. And one way or another, in the long run, you're going to go blind. Well, you can imagine that didn't make me feel very happy.
No, I can imagine that's not a good thing, huh?
And on top of that, I have not been in financially good situation for a long, long time, and I wasn't then. So I couldn't afford the injections. The only thing I could do, in fact, I couldn't even afford to see the specialist at that point in time, who was going to tell me that I couldn't do anything to fix this permanently. All I could do was, put off the inevitable. But what I did do is took advantage of this wonderful technology called the internet to go read up on it and learn about it. And the optometrist who told me that I had this condition and I needed to get it checked out by a specialist, by an ophthalmologist who specialized in this kind of thing, well, first of all, they weren't helpful because they didn't really tell me any of the answers. And secondly, they really didn't give me any hope other than to say, well, you got to get this checked out now. And indeed, you check all the stuff online about, you have to get regular checkups, they have to track it, they have to do all this other kind of stuff, but they still can't cure it. Now, I'm reading this stuff online on this wonderful internet, and I'm saying, wait a minute, there's something wrong here. I'm supposed to spend all this money and all this time to get injections that can actually be damaging. They can cause retina problems and all kinds of stuff. There are side effects to these injection treatments. And in the long run, I'm going to go blind anyway, and it's going to cost me a lot of money and a lot of pain. That doesn't sound like a good deal to me. There's got to be a better deal.
Yeah.
So there's actually a second piece of information. Well, there are a number of pieces, but I'm skimming over some of them. The crucial second piece of information is that one of the things that researchers have discovered that helps to slow to a crawl the process of slowly going blind or quickly going blind is a vitamin combination. And in fact, they call it the AREDS2 formula. I won't even bother to get into what that's all about, but basically it's some beta carotene related type stuff that if you take it on a regular basis, it slows down the process. So I thought to myself, well, that sounds possible. I went to Walmart, and sure enough, they've got that formula for about $30 a bottle. I said, well, I can afford that, So I didn't even go to see the specialist. Can you imagine that, Joel? I didn't even get to see the specialist, partly because I couldn't afford it, and partly because I didn't see a point to doing it. They couldn't. What are they going to do? They're going to stick stuff into my eye, and it's not going to solve the problem anyway.
Wow, yeah.
That was 8 years ago. Now, I don't know yet what the time frame is for somebody who is untreated with wet AMD for going blind, especially after the one eye is gone. What I do know is that it seems very unlikely that 8 years would intervene without the second one going blind. To this day, I still have problems. It's not like I have perfect vision. I've never had perfect vision. I've had to wear glasses since I was 5 or 6. But I still have vision in my right eye. I can still read. I can still drive.
Nice.
And I've been taking these vitamins religiously every single day, 2 to 3 vitamins a day. They recommend 2. I sometimes take 3 just to feel better.
Yes. Well, more is always better. Just that's a note.
Yeah, right. So I've been taking these continuously for 7 or 8 years. And I mention all this because it's been a long time since I've had an eye appointment. And I really kind of have to because my glasses are really in need of a change in prescription. And so I have that appointment. We're recording this show 2 days before it's actually broadcasting. So Yesterday, as you're hearing this, is when I'm actually going to the appointment. And I have to tell you, I had some apprehension about it. I still have it as we're talking right now, some apprehension about it. But I also realize there's an amazing thing here. Despite all the odds, I still have my eyesight.
Wow.
I still have my eyesight. And you know what, Joel? During that time, particularly in the last 3 or 4 years, I have been thanking the universe and God and spirit and source for, wow, I love the fact I can still see. I appreciate colors. I'm looking at a computer monitor right now. It's got oranges and yellows and greens and reds and blues on it, and I love it. I can see it. I've been doing that regularly as I can remember to do it. And I know that you know that I know that law of attraction is playing a role here.
Absolutely.
And the mind is playing a role here.
Yes. And we live that daily. You hear in your case it's I found this one interesting, and your incredible journey is a testament to where you're going with this. And I had a client that today was been in recovery now for about a week, and I told him last week, I said, you're probably going to get sick in the next few days. And he's like, why? And I go, I don't know. I said, what happens is people generally, I haven't been sick in a long time. So, well, you're in active addiction. You got a lot of craziness going on. Your body doesn't have time to be sick. And that's my theory. But inevitably, when you slow it down, the body's okay, here we go. We got a chance here. And it just sort of takes, and he called me today and said, your predicted sickness came true. And it really, it's I call it the recovery flow. It's something that is real, and it happens because the body, like right now, you're not believing, you don't have time for your vision to go away. It's not something I'm sorry, that's not in my plan right now. Let's move on.
Yeah, right.
Rhonda speaks about this in the secret of doing away with the reading glasses. There's a lot of examples of this huge belief that we have. When we can make whatever we need to make take place. And that's I've used the word exciting a lot today, but that really is the basis of all this. And I know we're getting close to the end here of this show, but the mind and the role it plays, your brain is an incredible tool that is your greatest asset or your biggest detractor, and you're in charge of it 100%.
And that's really it. That's it right there in a nutshell. And it's something that I'm still learning. I mean, I would be lying if I said, yeah, I believe in that totally. And the way I know that I don't believe in it totally is because things don't always work out the way I'm trying to visualize them to. So right. I know it. I mean, the results aren't there yet exactly the way I want them to be. So I know I'm not doing it perfectly right yet. I'm doing it a lot better than I did 5 years ago. A lot more consistently than I did 5 years ago. But am I doing it throughout my day? Well, not really. I can't honestly say that, but I'm getting better at it.
Yes, and that becomes the piece that I beg our audience to understand. I want everyone to grasp this. I live it. When I find my name, when I find my thought process not working right, when I hear my mind trying to sort of betray my thoughts, I don't accept it anymore. When a negative stuff comes in, or I'm sorry, that's not real, I'll call it out. I'll say, I'm sorry, wrong place, wrong time. You can't be here. Leave.
That's where I'm trying to get to. I love that idea that you can do that on a regular basis. Like, yeah, I'm going to get there. Come on.
Yes, and this is we talk every week that you and I talk. We get a great lift out of this ourselves.
Oh, big time.
In our audience, getting a great lift out of this is our goal, and being able to apply it. The brain portion of this is one of the most exciting things. That how it all came together for me, and my understanding of all this is just absolutely exciting. Absolutely exciting.
It is exciting. It's exciting. It's exhilarating. It's terrifying. It's thrilling. And every extreme emotional example, adjective you can come up with applies to it, because it's mind bending.
Yes, it really is. It really is. So keep thinking, believing, and I believe your eye can totally heal. I believe it can.
Well, I'll tell you what my goal is. My goal is to heal the other one as well.
Yeah,
which medical science says is impossible.
Which there's a lot of things that I watch every day impossible. The concept that the brain can rewire and redo things that science has not even come close to understanding. That gets us up again. That's the point. We do this.
That's true. Well, I do know one thing that is impossible, and that is it's impossible to keep going because we've run out of time.
Well, yes, I'm sad about that, but I look forward to us speaking again next week.
Absolutely. I do want to remind everybody, please subscribe to us at loatoday.net, or you can find us in the iTunes store. You can find us on YouTube. Be sure to check out our Facebook page. We even put out a tweet or two on occasion on Twitter. And Joel, it's been a pleasure as usual.
Walt, great to talk to you, my friend.
We'll see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.